why I'm concentrating on Yazidis, because the Yazidis were the main victim of genocide. Although there were other communities there, like Christians, Kakis, the ISIS crimes against them could amount to other international crimes, such as crimes against humanities. But what they did against the Yazidis was a genocide. So this could be analyzed through the proxy war perspective as well, where states take advantages of promoting proxy wars to increase their political and economic influence. Here we can realize the politicization of international law, okay? So the international law is not as workable as we can see from the United States and also here in the UK as well. So I will then analyze the responsibility of ISIS as an end-state actor in international law. And if you had any questions, please stop me. So just raise your hand, and dear Professor Uba, you can help out in this. So first thing, the recent events in the Middle East has led to an open-ended conflict. And why I chose Middle East, because really it's an area for students to learn a lot about different types of international law. So private law, international criminal law, international law itself as the interactions between states and non-state actors. So that the conflict in the region caught nearly every region in the Middle East. So we have about 16, 17 states there. I mean, none of the states are really in complete peace. So this includes both proxy wars and conventional wars. Just to give you an overview, the current nation states in the Middle East were emerged as the result of defeating the Ottoman Empire in 1918 and leading to the end of World War I. So the major opposing coalition in the Middle East defined a rivalry that has torn the whole region apart. As competition for dominance intensifies in the region, the confrontation between the major powers, such as Iran's network of state and non-state actors, Turkey and its allies, Saudi Arabia and its associated states and groups, and Israel on the other hand. So the conflicts are not uniform in the different regions of the Middle East. For example, the Yemen and Syrian civil war caused by the Arab Spring. So although it's recent, but albeit is very intensive. We have some other conflicts in the Middle East, such as the Kurdish struggle for independence in multiple countries, has been ongoing since the end of World War I. So basically since the emergence of these nation states after First World War. Iran and Iraq war lasted for 10 years between 1979 and 1989, and now Saudi Arabia and Iran's war lasted through proxies. Less debated but very controversial is Turkey's emerging role in the region. So it began by attacking Kurds in Turkey, then Cyprus in 1970s, then Iraq and Syria more recently. While some of these conflicts are internal, others have dispersed to their neighboring countries or more. In addition to the above, the involvement of international powers. So when we say international powers, could be the United States or the United Kingdom or any other major countries or members of the Security Council, with multiple sides has become the region's central battle line. These powers are not neutral in their regional struggle. It has deep-rooted military and economic ties to all these countries. So currently, the civilian people in the region, especially in Iraq and Syria and Yemen, have suffered the greatest loss. To an extent, hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, millions have been forced to flee, their ancestral land costing billions of dollars that otherwise could have been used to improve the life of people in their homeland. So through an international law perspective, it is very important to focus on minorities as well. And when I say minorities, I mean those minorities who are non-dominant groups in the Middle East, who are badly suffering due to their lack of access to justice internally, let alone internationally. So we can understand now how I'm going to the next slide, which is now move on to armed non-state actors and proxy war in the Middle East. Okay, so we can understand now how armed non-state actors and proxy wars cause further troubles in the Middle East. The conflicts in the Middle East are mainly related to rivalry between groups within a state or between state and groups. This is played out through a series of proxy conflicts, which has been one of the defining characteristics of the region for at least the past decades. It's important to understand the reason for rising the number of non-state actors. For example, why non-state actors in the United States or in Europe cannot carry out genocide? So why they can do that in the Middle East? It is a kind of a comparison, probably study, why this area is stabilized, why the Middle East is in conflict. I mean, since last 100 years. So here by non-state actors, I mean organized groups that is its members enjoy a shared distinctive identity created by its members for a particular cause and exercise temporary or permanent ruling authority over a particular region. So in the past decades, the rise of non-state actors are related to the failure of state building process in some countries in the region. Some non-state actors emerged as a response to the government's harsh policy approach towards their ethnic or religious groups throughout the Middle East. As a result, many communities have established their own armed groups to resist the state's policy, because some of the state's policy are discriminative in nature against their own people. So these type of conflicts are recognized under the international law of armed conflict. The main non-state actors in the Middle East, probably we could find them sometime from the Kurdish ethnic groups or otherwise from different sects of Islam, mainly Sunni or Shia groups. As such, in many countries, new local authorities emerged and affirmed their authority over a weak central government, because the non-state actors have occupied part of the country. Sometimes they become much more powerful than the central government. Thus, this phenomenon can be seen in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. In these countries, the non-state actors assumed a bigger direct role in providing citizen services such as security, identity, political voice, material assistance, and basic services. So, in addition, the regional powers such as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Iran have established or supported different non-state actors in order to increase their political and economic influence in the other less powerful states such as Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon. By looking at ISIS now, the organization wasn't come out of nowhere. So where rather ISIS was deep-rooted and has a strong background in the Middle East, but waited for a medium to grow and an opportunity to arise, and could possibly rise again. By states, ISIS rose to power between the border of multiple countries, such as Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Turkey. So the question here, how ISIS rose to power when most of its foreign members came from countries around the world. ISIS conducted multiple international crimes against many communities in the region, including the Sunni Muslims who didn't believe in ISIS' approach to Islam. However, ISIS cannot be held responsible as an organization or as an independent entity for the crimes it has committed. That's where the issue started, all right? Because they carry out the genocide and they disappear. So this is a big issue when states could use them as a tool for their own purpose and avoid the rule of law in international, especially international law, or turning their blind eye on the actions taken by the non-state actors because it benefits their policy. Simultaneously, many ISIS members have returned to their community, joined other non-state actors, or staying in camps or educating children, as this can be seen in Al-Hol camp in Syria. Against the rise of ISIS, the Shia sect in Iraq established Hashd al-Sha'bi, or Popular Mobilization Forces, and PMF, with the support of Iran, has now taken control over the authority in Iraq, and it is more powerful than the Iraqi army. Hence, we could say here that there is probably a complicity of states, and for allowing the rise of non-state actors, carrying out the crimes, use them for their own benefit, and avoiding responsibility towards international law. So I'm going to the next slide, which is taking us to minorities in the Middle East, because the minorities, I'm not talking about the minorities such as Alawi minority in Syria. They are in authority and ruling the country. So these type of minorities usually supported by other states, but turned out to be authoritarian in nature. So I'm talking about those minorities who are affected or who are victims of state policy or being attacked by other non-state actors. So within this context of this lecture, I will mainly focus on the non-dominant minority groups, because it is based on the facts who holds authority within the state, whether it's a minority or a majority. For example, as I said, Alawi in Syria, this was also the case in Iraq. In Iraq, there was the Sunnis before 2003, with the Ba'ath Party, the Sunni ruled the country, which were they only 20%. They comprised 20% of the Iraqi population. However, such ruling system, as I say, it's usually authoritarian in nature. I have always been in the view that the term minority is exploited sometimes, okay? And we should sometimes understand that when we say minority, it's a stigmatized word. Not here, probably in the Middle East, especially the communities that are identified as minority are deprived of their rights within the border of their hosting state. Hence, they are also denied access of justice within the current international law, as will be explained. I will explain that. I will go into detail a bit later when I'm focusing on the Yazidi, why the Yazidis couldn't be served with justice for the last 9 years when the ISIS attacked them. So let's define minority. Article 1 of United Nations Minorities Declaration, adopted by consensus in 1992, refers to minorities as based on national or ethnic, cultural, religious, and linguistic identity, and provides that states should protect their existence. Protect is the word in international law, although we usually use on a daily basis, but that protection is important because we have that as a state responsibility. We have that in the conventions such as, for example, Genocide Convention. So the protections include, but is not limited to, international crimes, right not to be discriminated against, whether these rights are political, cultural, or linguistic, or for the preservation of the minorities' heritages. In practice, under international law, the treatment of minorities is to be rooted in multiple treaty laws, in the customary international law principles of non-discrimination, which is fundamental in international law and is reflected in all human rights instruments and documents. These include, but not limited to, for example, International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Family, the Convention related to status of stateless persons, the Convention relating to the status of refugees, the Declaration on the Human Rights of Individuals who are not nationals of the country in which they live. So we have so many documents and treaties by the treaties and conventions made by states, which supposed to protect the right of minorities, not only in the Western countries, but in every country, in every state. Okay. So, however, in the Middle East, contrary to what is written in international law, the rights of many minorities are jeopardized in nearly all aspects of life, and the process of conducting crimes against them are justified through various pretexts. Many minorities or groups that are divided to be considered as minorities are subject to be controlled by dominant groups or groups within the authority of a state, subsequently being intimidated and provoked as well as their right violated. They are left with very few options but to resort to multiple approaches to defend themselves, including violent approach. So when I say violent approach, probably an armed attack on the states, or maybe it's a civil war between one group and another. So such status of minority is also defined in a different way, described in the definition provided by Francisco Capotorti, the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations. So that was in 1977. He believes a minority is a group numerically inferior. When you say inferior, then that must be a superior to the rest of the population of a state in a non-dominant position, whose members, being nationals of the state, possess ethnic, religious, or linguistic characteristics different from those of the rest of the population, and show, or if only implicitly, a sense of solidarity directed towards preserving their culture, tradition, religion, or language. So in most of the states in the Middle East, the new identity, when I say identity, national identity or state identity, resulted as it's created as the result of emergent nation states. When I say emergent nation states, that states created after one. So nearly most of the states in the Middle East were created after that, such as Iraq, Syria, and in Turkey, so Lebanon, and then later Israel in 1948. So going back to Saudi Arabia and then the Gulf countries. So these are some the countries which are created after that. So this identity, the issue is when they have named these states, the states does not represent the identity of every group. Imposing such national identity upon the true will of minorities without respecting their ethnicity, religion, language, and culture has caused conflicts. Such approach within these states has also created superiority and inferiority rather than peaceful coexistence under the umbrella of nation states. by looking at Christians, Yazidis, Armenians, Lurs, Baluch, and many other minorities suffer from being stigmatized and unwillingly squeezed within the border of state, practicing discriminative policies. When Turkey was established after First World War as the remnant of the Ottoman Empire, tens of thousands of Yazidis were living in Turkey. However, by now, nearly all the Yazidis have been either forced to leave or assimilated, because the constitution of Turkey used to be to say Turkey, but now they have changed the name into Turkey, so that's why I'm saying Turkey, does not recognize the Yazidi as a different religion or ethnic group. Whoever lives in Turkey must embrace the identity of Turks as it is noticeable from the state identity, Turkey. Hence, in those countries, dominant groups see themselves as superior by imposing their will over less powerful groups. It is such policy that have led the conflict and international crime, such as assimilation, ethnic cleansing, or even genocide throughout the region. So now, next slide, I am moving on to the rise of ISIS and the genocide against the Yazidis. So ISIS genocide against the Yazidis. So by further focusing on the case of the Yazidis, minorities are subject to violence, not necessarily by their hosting state, but rather by a proxy group or a violent group or a terrorist group, as this was the case here. This attack resulted in killing thousands of Yazidis and forcing the entire community out of Shingal, which is their ancestral land, in a space of few hours. So the entire community, nearly 500,000 people, left their ancestral land in only few hours, between 2 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So no one could stay in Shingal region. So the rise of ISIS was anticipated. It wasn't something suddenly came from nowhere. It was anticipated for months. To imagine, okay, so that's why I'm going back to protection, okay, and prevention. Prevention, these two words are the main concept of international law within the state responsibility and genocide convention. So the rise of ISIS was as anticipated, as I said, especially after the fall of the governorate of Mosul, where Shingal belongs. Before the genocide, ISIS had already carried out multiple international crimes. That's why it's anticipated. And it was foreseen that it will continue to commit crimes against other communities in the region. However, the Yazidis and other less powerful communities, I would rather to use non-dominant group or less powerful communities instead of just naming them as minorities. Okay, and Christians were there, but they were abandoned, left to their own fate. So every force just withdrew, and ISIS had no obstacles and resistance, and then started to killing civilians. So by 2 o'clock in the morning of the 3rd of August 2014, their fear of the Yazidis ended up in deadliest catastrophe of the 21st century, when ISIS finally managed to occupy Shingal, causing chaos. People could not run on time, and ISIS militants caught the people, especially in the villages long away from Shingal mountain or prior to arrive to the top of the mountain, because that mountain is called Mount Shingal. That mountain has accommodated the Yazidis for the last thousands of years. That's why the Yazidis have been able to survive. So on that occasion, all the Yazidis again ran away to the Shingal mountain. Then the ISIS began mass atrocity crimes, mainly in Shingal, inside the town or city, because some of the people could not reach safety on time, and many left behind. So Mount Shingal stretched towards the Syrian border, and close to the strategic formed triangle border between Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, and in northwestern Iraq. The Yazidis from previous early warnings were conscious of the ISIS intention that their region is, as part of their plan, to be invaded. But they were powerless to contain the ISIS advance and oblivious that the attack will take place on that night, on the 3rd of August, 2014, 2 o'clock in the morning. So from the first day of the attack, ISIS and its associated groups, so mainly when I say associated groups, the people in the region, so mainly made up of the Sunni Arab tribes who assisted ISIS advance to the region, focused their attack on the Yazidi people. They also laid siege on the Yazidi village, especially Kocho village and Kairouan sub-district. Kakadler knows because he's from the area and he knows very well. In the first 24 hours, ISIS was able to take control of all the towns and villages around Mount Shangal, around 5 towns, 12 to 13 districts, and then some other areas under the control of KRGs, which comprise of about 200 villages. So prior to the arrival of ISIS, the area mainly militarily and politically was under the authority of Kurdistan Democratic Party. They had around 11,000 their troops and security force under the command of the KDP, or Kurdistan Democratic Party. So they abandoned the area on the same night, just an hour earlier, or simultaneously when ISIS attacked, they just abandoned the area. And that's how ISIS managed to take control of the area straight away, without any obstacles or any resistance from anyone. The genocide was the act. So I'm just trying for you to understand what is genocide. Genocide, I'll try not to complicate it too much because it's a very complicated crime and it needs a lot, but I'm simply trying to describe the law itself. So it is the convention itself, it's Article 2 of the Genocide Convention states or says or means any of the following acts, which I am now referring to, committed with an intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So these acts as such, killing members of the group. So before I start that, in every crime, especially the domestic crimes such as murder, you only need to find the person guilty with one intention, okay? But with genocide, you need to find the person guilty of 2 intentions, okay? So one intention is that the person committed the murder, okay, or killed the person, and the second one, that person killed the victim not because he personally knows him, but because he's part of a group, okay? So 2 intentions. One of them is the real intention of the killing. Secondly, the real intention, he killed that person because he was part of the group. So the second act of genocide is causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Thirdly, I'll explain that in a bit later. So thirdly, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction or in whole or in part. Fourthly, imposing measure intended to prevent birth within the group. Fifthly, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So now I with a paragraph, I'll try to explain that law for you. So when you say, firstly, as I explained, the killing, so the secondly, I'm going to explain from B, so number 2 on the act, and then with the rest, genocide committed through any other acts that can bring about the destruction of a group as numerous. This includes preventing birth, as I said. So, for example, raping women, okay, or don't let that child to be born as or carry their own identity. That's called genocide if it's intentional. Denying basic necessities such as food and water, and inflicting physical or mental harm. So physical harm could be done by beating a person or shooting a person, injuring a person. Mentally, like a psychological torture, it could be mental. Usually rape is both physical and psychological. So these crimes primarily target women, okay, and have rarely been prosecuted. That's the issue. The ISIS members committed all these crimes against the Yazidis enumerated under Article 2, I just mentioned for you. So mainly because of their religious belief. So they didn't like the Yazidis for no reasons, only because they were Yazidis, because they believed in their own religion. Okay, so that's the only reason, and possibly their ethnicity. Genocide is primarily a crime of intent rather than a scale. So it's not about the whole community should be killed in order to become a genocide. It's about intent. Okay, so for example, multiple leaders to be killed in one community could amount to genocide as long as it's done with an intent. So intent is the mens rea within the international criminal law, and the gender non-killing crimes of genocide is essential to effectively intervening to stop the genocide and prosecute those responsible. However, so let's find out how ISIS, how they thought about the Yazidis. They had an online magazine. It's called Dabiq newsletter. Okay, and ISIS referred to Yazidis as pagan minority and instructs that they must be hunted and killed. So that means they don't like the Yazidis, and this is the evidence. The evidence can be found in their words in their online magazine. So that means the group tries to destroy another group. Okay, so the newsletter further notes that the Yazidi women should be enslaved, okay, and then divided according to the Sharia amongst the fighters. Okay, with all my due respect for Muslim, okay, I come from a Muslim family, so I'm not referring to Muslim as a whole. I'm just saying about how ISIS as an approach and used Islam in order to justify this type of killings. Okay, so divide the women among the fighters after 1/5 of the slaves were transferred to the Islamic State's authority and to be divided. And then once the women and girls are captured, typically ISIS separated them into 3 groups: married women with children, married without children, and young women and girls. So following separation, elderly women too old to be sold as sex slaves or used for physical labor are killed and buried in mass graves. I want to say sorry, I'm reminding this to Kakadler, but there needs to be more dispersed to people to understand of how ISIS basically treated the people. And ISIS was an unstate actor and a kind of stigma, kind of listed as a terrorist organization. So while these minorities were not protected during the attack, nonetheless, after nearly 9 years now, the Yazidi community have not been able to be served with justice. Okay, so this is now we are going into the international law. This is due to the fact that Yazidis are named minorities, and that's why in the beginning I started to tell you and take you through minority, right? And possess no power in Iraq to establish a court to bring perpetrators before a competent court. So when we say competent court, so that means independent court, because the state can establish a court, but maybe it's not competitive enough, all right? So despite the fact that they are the second largest religious group in Iraq after Islam, neither the Iraqi government nor the international community prevented ISIS from conducting such genocide, nor supported them to establish a competitive court to try the perpetrators. By now, most of the Yezidis, okay, have been destroyed or fading away. Am I all right with time? Sorry, I can't, I think you are on mute. I think you are on mute, yeah? Okay, I have 41 minutes. Yeah. So I'll carry on. I'll carry on when you say, you know. Yeah. Okay, so although the Yazidis have suffered from genocide under the current international law, cannot themselves access the benefit provided by ICC. When I say ICC, that means International Criminal Court. For example, the Yazidis can only put their case before the ICC or International Court of Justice when a state acts on behalf of them. An example, when Myanmar was accused of conducting genocide against the Rohingya people, who are considered to be Muslim minority in Myanmar, in the late attack in 2016, they were unable to take Myanmar before the ICJ or International Court of Justice or the court dealing with this with the states. So in November 2019, the state of Gambia, okay, lodged a 35-page application with the International Court of Justice. So now neither Iraq nor any country has supported the Yazidis in order to lodge a file before the ICC or ICJ. Again, this can show how justice is sacrificed for political and economic reasons in the Middle East. It could be said that such delays and lack of will to bring ISIS perpetrators before a court may lead to further investigations against some states, because some states were accused of assisting ISIS. So that caused the delays. Some states or groups which might be complicit. So certainly the Yazidis deserve justice, as was in the case of genocide in Rwanda or Srebrenica, when tribunals were established soon after the genocide was conducted. From the international law perspective, the rights of minorities are the same in every country. And such rights should not be politicized. Again, it is more problematic when after all this turmoil, the state of Iraq does not wish to become a member of International Criminal Court, okay, ICC. Hence, the vulnerable communities in Iraq are still subject to further mass human rights violations. So now I'm just going to the last slide, which is about the considering international law related to the armed non-state actors, okay, international system. So it's not, I am not saying that like the non-state actors are not subject to law or international law. They are subject to law, but there is no mechanism to implement that law, okay? So we don't have that mechanism. For example, in international humanitarian law or the law of armed conflict, okay, the non-state actors are obliged to respect, okay, those who are captured during or the prisoners of war. So the non-state actors also mentioned in the UN Charter of Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter of Customary International Law covers the prohibition of the use of force by non-state actors, for example. So there are mentions of non-state actors within the international law, but the problem is, as an independent entity, we cannot bring them to in front of a court. Only their individuals can be brought to the court, for example, the ICC or International Criminal Court, or maybe hybrid courts, okay, as we had them, for example, in different countries, such as, or maybe that hybrid court or domestic, sometimes the domestic courts adopt the international law and they can try the perpetrators, such as in former Yugoslavia or such as in Rwanda. So as I said, again, the non-state actors, they are subject to the Geneva Convention. Okay, so Article 3, common to the Geneva Convention, applies to parties involved in an international armed conflict. So other rules of international humanitarian law, such as 1977 Additional Protocol 2 to the Geneva Convention and the Hague Regulation, covers the involvement of non-state actors in armed conflict. Another one is the international human rights law. So in international human rights law, okay, it requires not the states only, but non-state actors, regional governments, companies to respect the human rights. Okay, so but the issue is how again we bring those non-state actors in front of the international court. And then another instrument or law of international law is RCWA, or Articles on the Responsibility of States for Internationally Wrongful Acts. Okay, so there we also have, there are, okay, we don't have like a clear international criminal law holds the non-state actors accountable for the crime they commit during the time peace or war. But Article 4 and Article 8 of RCWA, so when you say RCWA, that means Articles on the Responsibility of States for International Wrongful Acts, tries to tackle this area through holding states responsible through different means. Okay, so either by de jure, that means through a legal perspective, or by de facto, so that means through a practical way. So for example, if a state is caught using a non-state actor, and that non-state actor was legally part of the state, that state should be responsible, okay? Should be held responsible in front of International Court of Justice. Or otherwise, if it was not legally part of that state, but that state controlled or instructed, and there was evidence found out that that state controlled or instructed that non-state actor, the state could be held responsible for that. But the problem is, how could we find those evidences? And can the minorities, or for example, the victim groups, bring or obtain such evidence? This is very difficult again. And we can also understand that law of terrorism covers non-state actors, okay? But the law of terrorism, it's very vague. And at the same time, there is lack of a court to say, okay, we try these non-state actors for the crimes committed because it was a terrorist actor in front of a competent court. But they can basically listed as a terrorist organization, and this is, to an extent, is political in nature. So we should understand this, all right? And we, as I say, in international criminal law, we don't have such kind of instrument, but our own statute, especially Article 25D, okay, it says individuals are responsible, but then in Article 25.3, they says, in any other way contributes to commission or attempting commission a crime. So such crimes, even if it's by group. So then here, when we say group, that means it could be a group of non-state actors and can be tried, but individually, not as a group again. So here, I'm trying to summarize what I say. It is basically what I'm trying to focus here and summarize it for you. We had, for example, minorities in the Middle East. They are subject to discrimination because of the state policy, and they are subject to violence because of the state's policy and also the proxy wars and other non-state actors. So we have a trouble in terms of, in the Middle East, in terms of that national identity or this discriminative policy or the conflict now exists in the region. And the problem is the minorities cannot access to international law. And or the victim group cannot access the international law. Now we have the Yezidis after 9 years. None of the courts, for example, International Court of Justice or International Criminal Law, have accepted their case and start dealing or bringing the perpetrators in to be tried or held Iraqi government. Although probably some problems is from the Iraqi government itself, not everything should be, we should like criticize the ICC because Iraq is not part of the ICC, is not a member of the ICC. So I'm now ending this because I think I have passed my limit, 5 minutes over the limit, but It is sometimes when you start talking, you just difficult to stop, especially when the subjects is very interested to me, and hopefully it's interested to you all. I'm now open to any questions you have. It's your turn, Takadler or Professor Oba.
Thank you so much, Professor. Yeah, I learned quite a bit about in your lecture. A lot of things that we've been talking about, not in so much detail as you have elaborated in your lecture today. So I'm gonna open it up for the students to ask questions, and I want them to generate these questions themselves. I do have two questions myself, but I'm gonna save mine for last because I want the students to be engaged in this discussion more importantly than me. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. If you're ready, just unmute yourself and ask the question. I hope you're still here, you know.
Can I ask a question?
Of
Yes,
course.
go ahead.
Okay, so I've always been interested in what international law can do in the following case that I'm going to tell you about. In 2004, there has been a NATO-sponsored military training event in Budapest, Hungary, and there was Armenia and Azerbaijan both sent their some of their officers for those trainings. You probably know that Armenia and Azerbaijan have an ongoing conflict for decades now. And in during those times, that was supposed to be 3 years, there was this military officer from Azerbaijan called Ramil Safarov, who axed an Armenian officer to death. His door was open, he entered and killed him. He tried to kill the other officer, but his door was locked, so it was an attempted murder from the other side. So he was sentenced in Hungary for minimum 30 years of imprisonment, and then Azerbaijan reached out and asked to take him to court in Azerbaijan since he's of that nation, of citizen of that nation, that country, and he was given a hero's welcome, given a lot of praises and praised for killing an Armenian, stuff like that. So my question is, what can international law do in this case to kind of bring such events to justice?
Question. I know where you're coming from, and it was a big, big trouble between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which ended up in Artsakh to be occupied or to be retaken by Azerbaijan. This is a kind of this is a problem, as I said, in international law. I mean, there, I saw many. I watched many videos and many videos from probably Armenian community sent to me that Azerbaijani army have committed, for example, killings against civilians. So both Armenia and Azerbaijan, they are both states, okay? And the issue is in this state because there was an agreement, and the agreement was like between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Armenia can take Azerbaijan to court. It's called International Court of Justice. International Court of Justice, it is basically a court that listens to states, not individuals, okay? And then they could, through that route, tackle the situation. For example, not the state officer. I think so many other people involved in killing civilians in Artsakh. And at the same time, the Armenian government has the right to take to name those individuals and approach the international criminal. I'm not sure whether Armenia is a member of the ICC or not, but at the same time, they can ask the Security Council. Okay, the Security Council through that route. If there is enough evidence, and I believe there are a lot of evidence because I think some of the ex-ISIS fighters were taken to Azerbaijan to fight in Artsakh, and not just the ex-ISIS fighters, but some other groups as well. So there are multiple issues involved in such situation, and it is very complex. It's the issue is, because there is a treaty or there is an agreement or there is a protocol between Armenia and Azerbaijan with the mediation of Russia, probably that has stopped Armenia from doing such things. Otherwise, I mean, Armenia is a state, and it has a right. For example, okay, when Serbia attacked Bosnian Muslims in Srebrenica, and there was a genocide, Mladic, who was the VRS, the head of the VRS is the group who carried out the genocide in Srebrenica against the Bosnian Muslims. And then he was taken to court. Okay, he was taken to the court there was a court in although that court was in Netherlands, but it was an ICC. It was specially established to try the cases for genocide, crimes against humanity carried out within the former territory of the territory of former Yugoslavia. So I would say that probably in some way or another remind the government of Armenia, right? They are, because the Ezidis don't have a government. Okay, so this is a problem, and the Iraqi government is mainly majority and authority is the Muslim. And the Yazidis are only a small community. So this is the problem, that the Yazidis cannot access ICC, but Armenia could access ICC and ICJ, International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court, and they can ask for ad hoc type of court. Okay, they could kind of establish such courts in any country or Armenia, and then try them in absence. Okay, and find them, for example, guilty for what they did, and but there should be a competent court. I hope that answered the question, but.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not Tigran. Tigran, I hope you answered. Yeah, because what you touch on brings me to the question that I have, and then I'll leave it up for the class. I just couldn't stop myself. So from what I'm hearing in your discussion is that the non-state actors, which terrorist groups like ISIS are one, they don't have legal personality per se, right? In international law. So if they don't have legal personality, so states can outsource some of their bad practices to these non-state actors, and therefore absolve themselves of responsibility. So really what I do as a president is just create a non-state actor, and I want to get rid of a minority and get them to do the action. And if you can't connect it to me, I don't have any responsibility. Is that what your thesis is, right?
Yeah, this is absolutely. I mean, my today's my today's is all about this is a type of complicity. Okay, yeah. So I did my whole thesis on that. That complicity is a very complicated law. So exactly, you are right. For example, ISIS now disappeared, so the states can create another group from the ex-fighters of ISIS, name them MISIS or anything else. And they can carry out more crimes. And then as long as the state is not found that has created, supported, and facilitated the rise of that state. You are absolutely right.
So, but can we hold these people accountable as individuals? I mean, within local domains, right? So like Iraq can try them, Syria can try them. Just internationally, there's like a big loophole in that. And it's just not for weak states like Iraq or Syria. It also means when we explicate it further, it could be used even within big states. So like a militia, for example, in the United States can commit acts against other people. And if the government is looking on the other side on that, they get away with it.
Yeah. This is true. I mean, there is a case of talisman in the United States. The talisman is a kind of the issue when the Sudani government carried out some the people from, I think, south of Sudan, brought the government to be tried at according to the, I think it's a tort act, okay, in the United States.
Yeah.
This is the only act that could try non-state actors, but not internationally, because that law is within the United States. But then later, for political reasons, the case was dismissed, right? And but of course, I mean, for example, some of the ISIS fighters in Germany were tried for genocide, and they were found guilty for genocide. But is every state which the ISIS fighters went to can try these ISIS fighters? I mean, many of them went back to their community, but I mean, the states have turned their blind eye on the ISIS fighters come back. So this is the issue with the states policy, okay? There are so many of them sent by states to other countries. And yes, as individuals, they can be tried. They can be tried in any country for international crimes, okay? So, but at the same time, there is, I mean, the Security Council, as well as the ICC, the prosecutor at the ICC, they can open an investigation for those people, and if they have names, those names can be those people can be extradited to the court. We have so many cases from Congo. We have cases from the people from Congo, which is extradited to the ICC, and they were tried. And we have other cases, for example, from even from Rwanda, or for example, from the former Yugoslavia. Some of the people who ran away, they brought back again. They brought back again to Netherlands, and they were tried by the ICC. So yes, as individuals, yes, but because ISIS doesn't have a legal personality, as you say, it's impossible to be able to try them as an independent entity. And the state doesn't allow. The issue is the states, they only like themselves to be part of international system. They don't like, for example, the non-state actors to have a legal personality and to be seen and regarded the same status as states.
Okay, I see some people raising up their hands. Yeah, I wonder if they can unmute themselves and just ask the question, or is it like a technical? Yeah.
No, I could. I just like wanted to wait because I think I muted myself when you started talking. Hi, my name's Henna, and I was kind of wanting to ask the question to you because you've kind of touched upon it briefly right now with the answer. Why is it so problematic for states to like recognize in a way like non-state actors as kind of like that has like bodies that have legal power? Because what made me think when you said like, oh, states only want to be recognized as the ones in international law and community, and that like, you know, which makes it harder to try ISIS and all, is that what happens in like in the case of like diplomats when like individuals can represent like the states? Like basically my question is like, why is it so puzzling that individuals can represent states and their powers in international law, and we can try individuals for individual like big war crimes, but states still don't want to give up kind of that power to recognize the whole for lack of a better word, non-state actors as actual actors, if it makes sense.
Yeah. The issue is, I mean, we have to understand in some other perspective as well. For example, a group emerges within a state, okay, and then they try to resist the state's policy. Okay, probably that state's policy is, as we can see in some countries, it's against the production of drugs. Okay, so this is an non-state actor, but we won't be able to recognize, for example, that non-state actors because some people got together and then they have created a group, okay, and then give them a legal personality. ISIS, for example, I mean, about 30,000 people came from around the world and joined ISIS through some countries, okay, and then they came to Syria, okay, and then they carried out genocide. This non-state actor is completely a violent non-state actor. I mean, it's a problematic, for example, to give them a legal status. But at the same time, we can see Yezidis, the minority. They have been divided. They have been squeezed between different nation states. they deserve to be, for example, independent, okay, within their own region, okay. That is, for example, given the type of minority status within the international law. So, for example, the Kurds, okay, the Kurds, they are, for example, divided after the First World War between Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. So, although they are one of the majorities, but because they were divided between different countries, now they are minority. They are called minority in each country. And the issue is because their land is so, the land where the Kurds live in is so rich. None of these states would like to dismantle, their nation states and give the right to Kurds. Okay, so it's rather to oppress them and use the resources from the land of the Kurds, and then they can, some other countries, for example, benefit from that, okay, financially and politically. So therefore, although in a kind of we have the law, as I say, for example, minorities need to be equal. They should not be discriminated against. They should have the right according to their status within that state. But politically, it is problematic. And that political is basically where remap the Middle East. I'm talking about the Middle East. So again, after World War II, okay, World War II. I mean, they had the power. I mean, who are the major powers? The superpowers. The superpowers. We have 5 different superpowers which are the members of the Security Council: China, France, UK, and then United States and Russia. Okay, you can see that there is a problem. We had a Cold War. Okay, we had a Cold War, and now probably we will see some other Cold Wars after the war in Ukraine. So this is a problem. I mean, it's more political in nature rather than the rights within the international law.
So just to follow up, does this then make you in a way lose faith in international law as something that exists that should not only help states interact, but also kind of like with the idea of United Nations, for example, to better like lives of individuals? Does these talks to realize that there's power politics in play and there's interest of, I would dare to even say, like individuals ruling the states over people, like as somebody practicing it, does it make you kind of lose faith in it?
Probably I'm a critical of that, a critical of the international law, but I mean, we have to see so far, I mean, how the world has been run since the creation of new international law after World War II, and how the history was before that, okay? So you can't, international law, it is not just the process of 2 days or 3 days or a year or 10 years or 20 years. It's a process of customary international law. It's a process of states participate in creating such laws. It's a process of different nations and then how these nations come together in order to promote international law. I would never say lose hope, okay? Because if we lose hope, then at the end, we don't fight for our rights, okay? So we just let those who have taken control of the international law to carry on the same. Okay, because for example, if you look at it, okay, before they were only empires and later they became states, and now states many of the states do not have control over their borders. Okay, for example, the age of globalization, and now we are in the age of, for example, technology. You are here, I am there. There are companies probably much powerful than states. Okay, and these companies also make international law. What I am trying to tell you is international criminal law. Okay, international criminal law is very, very complicated, but at the same time, it's very stigmatic. So, for example, state do anything, okay, in order not to be stigmatized for genocide. Because, for example, when we say, just look at Germany, right? Holocaust. Still, Germany pays for that. okay, because Holocaust was carried out within Germany, although not those young generation or probably the old generation carried out this, but still, you know, former Yugoslavia, the genocide in Rwanda, okay, Slobodan Milosevic, you know, he was died in prison. So no one wants that. What I am discussing here is international criminal law. Probably if you go to company law, we have company law, we have the law between states, we have diplomatic law, we have the law of diplomacy, we have, so each of them work differently. Okay, the same as we have domestic law. We have in domestic law, some people are interested in criminal law, some people are interested in public law, in land law, in property law, in any other laws, you know. So contract law. Okay, so you know the country, we can't just completely dismiss international law. How these companies work together is through contract law, you know.
If somebody has no, we have about 3 minutes, and if those ones want to leave and have other class, they can leave. But those of you want to have ask other question, if you will be willing to stay, Professor Hoshman, for 5 more minutes or so, it'd be kind for them to get some questions in.
Absolutely, yeah. That's
Yeah.
I'm at your service.
I do have one question myself. It's something you mentioned about pagan minority that ISIS labeled the Yazidis as pagan minorities in order then to execute a genocide on them. And I've been reading the history of international law, and the early scholars, especially in the settlement of the New World, the Americas, while using this concept of natural law, had this fascination of how to exclude native communities from the natural law, from Grotius and all these other thinkers. So they then call, oh yeah, their culture is uncivilized. And then if their culture is uncivilized, then technically they have no rights that we have in a civilized society, so then we can occupy their land. And it seemed very interesting to me that ISIS will also, as savage and animalistic as they are, they will also use kind of the same logic. You know, it's very interesting. I thought it was very interesting.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, they do use such type of stigmatization in order to try to publicize their messages. Okay, so it's all about the brainwash. Okay, so for example, these people those people are dirty. Those people they cannot be. You know, we had seen that, for example, in the genocide of Rwanda, how they started. Okay, so when the Hutus started to stigmatize the Tutsis, and then the same thing, for example, against the Yezidis. And Yezidis, if we look at it, I mean, it is a kind of more than 4,000 year religion, old. You know, it's a very old religion, and what they have been trying in order to get support, because to get support from the community, okay, from those who live within the area close to the Yazidis, because I believe that the Yazidis were sacrificed because of their geographic location. Okay, but they couldn't just come and attack them. Okay, the states could not just come and attack them and eliminate them. So there was a creation of such non-state actor, and there was a message in order to use as a pretext to justify their such killings. So justificating, for example, infidels. All right, when we say infidels, that means that person could be killed, you know, according to the law, what they believe. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the kind of very, very problematic words, and these words lead to actions to be taken against the minorities, and that would be probably in the United States some kind of discrimination against the people who believe that the United States was their ancestral land, and then you know, for example, the same in Australia, or you know, in any other communities in the world.
Hi, my name is Macy. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I just on your last point, you said that you believe it had to do with the geographic location. Is that because the land underneath has, you know, economic opportunity, or was it just simply for the geographic location between the states, or?
Yeah. Sorry, finished? Yeah, the question finished, yeah?
That was it. I'm sorry. I cut out last second.
Right. So what it was, this is a very political and sensitive case, right? The issue is there used to be, for example, that part used to be Mosul area, Mosul, all the way go back to some other areas to Afrin. So the states wanted for these communities to be assimilated, okay? And the main, for example, I will just tell you one thing, okay? When ISIS took over Mosul and Shangal area, ISIS started to trade oil, okay? And they funded their military activities and probably any under state, because they declared ISIS. ISIS means like it was a state of Islam. Okay, so they funded the government apparatus. They funded their activities through selling their oil, and where all these oil sold to. Okay, so this is the question that I don't want to go into very detail at this moment, where exactly where this oil sent to and why they wanted, for example, this area to be occupied or invaded by such group, and who benefited from that group. Okay, so the issue is ISIS managed to take control over the Syrian side, which is the more western side of Shingal, and also ISIS took control of the eastern side. So the Yazidi was in the middle of that. So ISIS, when basically ISIS took control of that, they accomplished the mission. Okay, so the whole area came under the control of ISIS, and that area benefited some countries there. Okay, because they wanted to take control of all the oil there, as well as the land, as well as I say, increasing their political influence in the region, because they saw Iraq would be divided. So if Iraq is divided, okay, for example, if it's like the communities all raise up and they declare their own independence, so ISIS could have also declared its own independence, but with the support of some states there. But probably that's, if the Yazidis were there, okay, they would not support, or they wouldn't get support from that state. I wouldn't say, I would not, I don't want to, completely say the name of that state, but probably if you search for it, you'll find out. And yes, it's more economic and political reasons behind that geographic location.
Do we have any more? One last question, otherwise I just do a vote of thanks. Do we have one more?
I have a question.
Yes,
Professor, you mentioned in your lecture that, protection and prevention were like the main concepts of international law within state responsibility. And I was just thinking, like what explains the failure of states to protect minorities? Like I was just thinking of the Uyghur ethnocide in China, and like, why aren't international organizations or international law able to prevent these genocides and ethnocides from like continuing to happen? Or is there like, maybe that's just a bigger concept for like the need for change in international law, but is there anything that explains that?
Right, so basically what you mean is like why these states have been given green light to carry out such discrimination policy, and they are not held responsible for their acts.
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically what it is, I mean, the whole world is divided between the states that we are in now. Okay, and the way that is mapped or remapped, however, like from the past, I mean, one way or another, some communities are which are not happy with that state located or with squeezed within such states. But the issue is those who take control, or dominant groups who take control of the state apparatus, they, with the other states, for example, what they will do, they create kind of what I would say is links, okay, and such links between them, between those authorities, benefit them to stay, okay, so to benefit them to stay and to remain within the authority, and they get support from each other, okay. So for example, now in Syria, okay, in Syria, that Alawi is a minority group, and it's only 20% of the population of Syria. But nearly many countries went in order to destroy that authority. They couldn't, because that authority was supported by some other authority, because they had a link, and they had a common interest. Okay, what I would say is a common interest between them, so they support each other in order to remain. So the issue is the rights nowadays is only for the states to access such type of legal instruments and practices within the international system. So what they have done is the states have created these organizations for themselves. Okay, so what they it is like the states have created United Nations. They have created, for example, ICC. They have created International Court of Justice, and most of the cases they use it for their own benefit to stay in power. And then the issue is, unfortunately, the minorities do not have such power in order to rise and declare their own independence, unless the state become dismantled, the same as the issue that we can again refer back to the former Yugoslavia, or like south of Sudan, they had some support. For example, they declared independence. Look at the Jewish people. They only managed to declare state in 1948 because they had a support from the UK, they had a support from the United States and some other countries. So the other, in terms of China is a member of the Security Council, right? And then China has a lot of connections with many other countries. Probably they will not vote against China for the benefit of the minorities or the less powerful groups in the region. But that's we should not stop that, because we should not stop there, because we have so many other, as I said, the South Sudan community finally managed to get support from the international community and declare independence. Since 1991, okay, since the end of the Cold War, so many other states were created, okay, and many of those states were minorities, okay, Croatia, Bosnia, or what we can, South of Sudan. So we have many to name, and we should just keep trying. I am from a community, okay, as I said, I'm Kurdish originally, but our land and also our people completely divided between multiple countries. And whenever we amount to about 40 million people, 50 million people in the Middle East, but we still don't have a state, because our state is not in the interest of the international powers and the regional powers in the region.
Lorena, do you have something to say? It's pretty sad to hear this Kurdish position, and how the international system has isolated their condition, their predicament.
I don't really have a questions. I think like what I heard just keep confirming some of the thoughts I already had about how international community and how some power structures actually influence a lot of what is going on, how some cases might have an advantage because of that position.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
President Hoshman, I think it's what time is it in London right now?
No, fine. I'm fine with time. So yes, of course. I mean, it's the time in here in the UK is 22 9, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, it's 22:9 here. But yes, of course. I mean, the power does work, and still within this international system. I mean, we have so many other instruments, apparatures, organizations try to restrict the power of states, and we have seen a lot of progression. For example, within the Western society. Okay, so we could see that there are a lot of rights being given to some communities, which we cannot see the same rights being given to the minorities, for example, in the Middle East. Okay, because there is a conflict. But we have to understand, right? We have to understand that still these powerful states in the Western society are in contact with the states in the Middle East. Okay, so they could influence the states to give more rights, but there are also other connections, especially financial connections between those states, the Western countries, and we know that in some, to an extent, China and Russia, they have started to act to say that they are neutral. Okay, and they blame especially in terms of the human rights, because it's a kind of the Western notion. Always, the blames go back to the Western society, right? Because that's where, human rights is created by them, but human rights as an idea before existed in many other religion groups, and thousands of years ago, the human rights have been given and written in some other books. But what I'm saying, the notion by now as a human rights instrument, to some extent. So yes, the power unfortunately still can lead the world, and then we have less international law instruments and mechanisms in order to make a balance between power and rights.
Wow. All right, thank you, Professor. We're gonna have to end it here. I know this conversation can go on endlessly, but it's really nice to hear from you and to just understand the intricate details of international law, particularly among minority communities in the global South, especially the case of the Yezidis in Yazidi groups within the Kurd larger community. Yeah, I'm really grateful for your time, a lot of time, and I'm sorry for our technical hitch earlier, but it turned out great, and we really enjoyed your lecture. And I'm gonna save this, and I will share with you once I upload it on YouTube, so you can have access to it. And if you want rights to it, I can tag you on it as well. All right.
Yeah, it was so great to see you all and listen to you all, and it was a pleasure to be able to be at your service today, and it is hopefully we'll see you again.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye.